did 13th Avenue. I'm sure you've heard plenty about the problems on 13th Avenue, and in fact, I haven't heard of anyone who considers it even rideable. Pretty much everyone is fine with the elements in the street. It's the traffic signals that have created a disaster. And while I've heard Shane say that staff is working on fine tuning and adjusting the signals, it's clear to me that there's no amount of adjusting that will make the signals okay. I think the problem is in concept, not just in implementation or timing. Prior to the protected bikeway, a person on a bike could proceed from Charlton to at least Patterson at a slow but steady rate, maybe about 10 miles an hour, and never have to stop because the signal would turn green as you approached each intersection. With the new bikeway, that rider, while traveling east or west, would have to stop at each of the 6 intersections, even as cars proceed on through. Just about a year ago, Oregon finally allowed bicyclists to yield rather than stopping at stop signs, because lawmakers recognize that it is terribly inefficient and unreasonable to ask a bicyclist to stop and then start up again when stopping is really not necessary. Yet the new bikeway requires a bicyclist to stop at each intersection in order to trigger the bike signal. This is ridiculous. If it's unreasonable to ask bicyclists to stop at every stop sign in the rest of the community, why is it reasonable to make them stop unnecessarily at each block of 13th Avenue? This inconsistency between state law and local regulation creates confusion and frustration, and the result that many of us have seen is that bicyclists either ignore the red bike signals on 13th or avoid the street altogether. In addition, I think the attempt to use signals to create absolute safety for people riding bikes on 13th actually discourages safe cycling habits. Any experienced bicyclist knows that the way to be safe is to anticipate the behavior of other road users and to communicate with motorists by signaling and establishing eye contact with them. On 13th Avenue, however, the implicit message is to wait until you get a green bike signal and then do whatever you want, regardless of what others on the road are doing. Relying on traffic signals to keep you safe is bad practice. Safe cycling is defensive cycling. Finally, I'm concerned that the signals create unnecessary hostility and resentment among different groups of road users. When a person riding a bike has to stop at an intersection while people driving cruise on through, it's hard not to be resentful. Meanwhile, motorists who are stopped at a red light, but then see a bicyclist ride through the intersection will probably assume that the bicyclist is an illegal scofflaw, since the motorist can't see the green bike signal. Many motorists will simply assume that bicyclists in general are irresponsible lawbreakers. This antipathy undermines the share the road approach that the city tries to promote on other streets. We need to salvage this important bikeway. I urge the city to at least try for a month or so, turning the bike signals off altogether and placing stop signs for westbound bicyclists. Eastbound bicyclists could proceed with caution following the normal traffic signals, while westbound bicyclists could stop or yield at the intersections. I don't know whether this approach would work, but it could hardly be worse than the current situation and might at least provide information as to how to save what should have been a great project. Finally, please take the lessons from 13th Avenue into account when designing a high street bikeway, including reconsidering protected one-way bikeways on High and Pearl to avoid the problematic bike signals. On 13th, a frustrated bicyclist can choose from a number of alternative routes to avoid the frustrations of 13th, but there are very few good alternatives to High and Pearl streets as a north-south route. I applaud the city's efforts to create safe bikeways, but they also have to be functional bikeways. So that is the comment from Sue Walling. Hopefully I didn't go over my 3 minutes.
I think she did. That's okay. We have some time, and it looks like we don't have any other public comment. So I guess I can somewhat address that comment. I think that these are things that we've heard from ATC members and from other community members, though I hadn't heard that creative solution that she put forth before. And and she's right, it's not very likely we would mix a stop sign with traffic signals. Just not a good engineering practice. And I just want to highlight that, as you all know, and as we've said, this is a work in progress. Just today, I know that the team was out with putting in and adjusting some of the new communication equipment that we've been waiting on. And one of the improvements that I know that they are doing is having the signals go to a wait on red. No, I think it's called something else where it sits on red, so that all signals turn red if there's no traffic there, and then the first trigger that it gets the light, and it's just another way to speed up sort of the bike priority there if the person on the bike arrives first. I think that there's a lot more testing and refining. And as Andy told me today, what you see now is not what you will see in 3 to 6 months. It's going to be very different as far as how it operates, or at least different. So that continues to be the case, that it's going to be refined. And we are definitely learning a lot for High Street. And I know that Reed has already had some conversations with the team about that.
Josh, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that we can somehow direct Sue to the response Shane gave. I don't know, a link to the YouTube or something like that, so that she knows that we attempted to address her comment.
Yeah, thank you. We will.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Yeah, I had rewriting it yesterday. I had a question about the elevated crosswalk and why there isn't some sort of like on-demand signal to tell people to stop there. It's a little scary. I mean, the sight line for the inner lane is not great, and they don't often stop. Like, I mean, I felt pretty scared. I mean, trying to make it across that crosswalk. So anyway, that was a question I had. And the other thing was, what is the reasoning behind the fact that the signals are not synchronized with the pedestrian signals on that same side? I just was wondering about that too. I'm sure there's a very, like a good traffic reason for that.
So some of that is in the frequently asked questions that we have on the website. Signal timing for pedestrians is generally pretty long, and it's actually longer than the bike phase that we currently have. So that's why it runs with cars. And then the first question was about the elevated crosswalk. It doesn't seem to be working the way that we wanted it to. It does slow people down, maybe too much. We've had a lot of complaints about it. I don't know that we're going to do that design again. So if you really, really like it, you should tell your counselor that it's good. What amount of paint, signs, marking, lights would be enough to tell people to cross to the other side of the street is a question we've been wrestling with. And I would love some suggestions.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, one suggestion that just on that point, Reed, the last couple of times I drove on 13th Avenue, it just struck me that a little bit earlier signage that notifies drivers to start slowing down would be really helpful. It kind of comes up on you quickly. So that's just one thought. But on the rest of the 13th Avenue design, it strikes me, this is just anecdotal, it seems to me from observation, there's a lot less bike traffic than there was when we weren't in a pandemic lockdown. And there were a lot more college students using 13th Avenue. I assume that was part of the design concept. And I think Sue's point that there's a lot to learn on High Street that's going to be very different. I kind of suspect that once you get enough, I'm going to say, given the experience of taking the group ride with Reed leading, and there's a fairly large group, my experience was the light sequence was pretty good when you're in a big group. You're coming up behind, the light is already turned, and you're following a large group through. And I think that's some of that is going to be much more true of the experience when you have large groups of students using it. I don't know if this is true, but I suspect it is. So I think it's important to at least have that kind of volume of traffic in the conversation with people who are unhappy with the design.
All right, Shane, did you see anybody else that had public comment? No?
No, oh, I'm sorry. I do see a hand raised now, but I do want to highlight that we are now closer to time. But since that person might have raised their hand before, I will bring them on. Oh, unless they took their hand back down. Oh, no, there it is. It keeps appearing and disappearing. So I'm not sure what's going on there. So I'll bring a person on for a public comment. It says MX Wilson, so I'm not exactly sure. And allow you to speak, and you're unmuted now.
Okay, thank you, Shane. You do know me, I'm Alpha. And I just wanted to say that hearing Sue's letter, it's a lot of what my own experience has been on 13th. I was really excited to go down there, and a lot of what Sue said was very much my own experience. What I do like about the design is like when the light is green for cyclists, I don't have to worry about a left hook. That's fabulous. I just wish that the timing was a little better. And the biggest thing, the other big issue that I had was that I didn't see coming up, I wasn't expecting the transition from right hand to left hand to happen at Lawrence. And so I didn't see it coming up. And then all of a sudden I was in the traffic lane on 13th with the cars on 13th. So, because it wasn't unclear to me what was going to happen where that raised crosswalk was. But other than that, it was a very pleasurable experience. And so that's the end of my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I will close public comment and move on to agenda item number 3, which is approve the November 12th meeting summary notes. Does anybody have any comments? And if we could see thumbs up for everyone who approves it. All right, looks like everyone has approved it. So we can move on to the very important number 4, officer elections. So 3 of the people who are on this meeting right now are not going to be on the committee in January. That would be myself, Robbie, and Nick. And so we need to have a discussion about who would like to potentially take over as chair, or if you want to do it like Robbie and I did, where we had kind of 2 co-chairs. We could have that discussion too. Does anybody have nominees that want to nominate themselves or have any other comments?
Bob, can you tell us what it is you do other than facilitate meetings? Or
The
Robbie?
meeting facilitation is really the biggest thing that we do. Lee does ask us for input on the agenda. I think, you know, he tries to get the input from the entire committee as well. But, you know, as chair, if you have things that you believe the committee would like to hear on a specific date or agenda, you do have the air of the big man over there in the corner there, Lee. So outside of that, it's really being here to facilitate the meetings. Josh, do you have anything else to add? You were an amazing chair of this committee for a year.
Thank you. I'd be willing to serve again, but I want to provide space for some other members if they are interested. I'll note that when I served as chair last year, I'd only been on the committee 6 months before I was voted in. So don't feel like you need a ton of experience. It's mostly meeting facilitation. And so if it's something you're on the fence about, I encourage you to self-nominate.
And again, if someone wanted to share the role with Josh, so, you know, there are times when we all have scheduling conflicts and we can't be at a meeting. So it is nice to have someone who could step in. Something we've done in the past is had a chair and then a vice chair. And so the person who acted as chair was primarily the one who facilitated the meetings. But if for any reason that person couldn't be there, the vice chair was there to kind of act as a backfill.
So I'd be happy to serve, but I think as an ATC member, I'd be happier if it were possible for someone who is not a white male to serve.
Yeah, I was just going to encourage, we haven't had a woman chair in a while. So if there's anyone who feels empowered and supported in doing that, I think that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think in the 4 years that I've been on this committee, it's been a white dude every time. So I think it'd be really good to bring in someone else as well.
Anyone else? Any more discussion?
One of the things I believe we did a few years ago was also only elect one chair at this meeting. And then in January, when there were new committee members who might be interested, elected the other chair. And so if we are desirous of diversity in the leadership, but no one's willing to step forward right now, perhaps they will be in January.
Good point.
I would be willing to step in as vice chair or co-chair.
Excellent. I like that. Josh or Daniel, would you like to share the role with Grace and act as co-chairs, kind of like Robbie and I did?
Daniel, if you're interested in it, I'd be happy to have you do it. I'm certainly willing. I'm not opposed to it, but I always like new voices.
Yeah, I'm not attached, but I'd be very happy to. Just whatever's best for the group.
So I am hearing that we have two people who wish to step up and share the role of chair for the upcoming year. That would be Grace and Daniel. I guess we can all vote on it if there's no other discussion, and we'll move forward with that. Is that what we need to do, Lee, or does it just happen by happenstance?
You should vote to confirm.
Okay. So thumbs up for Daniel and Grace to co-chair for next year. All right. It's unanimous with the newly elected chairs abstaining from voting for themselves. So thank you guys, really do appreciate it. And I'll have to come to the meetings or attend just to see you guys at work. So, all right. Next, we have a thanks to the departing committee members, which are Robbie, myself, Marina, and Nick. And Robbie and I are the presenters on this one. So I don't know, Nick,
Thanks, Bob.
if you wanted to say anything about your time here and just your experience on the committee, well, I think we'd all love to hear that.
Hey, yeah. Can you guys hear me fine?
You're a little quiet.
I know my speaker is not working really well. I'm not exactly sure why. I can talk louder.
That works. That works.
Great. All right. So my experience here has been very interesting. I really like the application process and how it went. It was really important to meet everybody from the city side first. I really enjoyed being participate in the meetings because it showed me a lot about how the meeting structures worked in the city, and I thought that was really, really important. Other things that I learned about, working with you all is like just what differences come to the table. There were so many important parts of that. People worked in different sectors, people participated in different parts of the community, and I liked learning and meeting all of you guys and working with you all that way. I think that was really, really some of the best part of this. I think some of the hardest things were just in general how life has changed in these past few years, and just being on the computers is just really, really hard for me throughout all the other stuff in my life and this. And I think that had a huge part in that. So I think, after this pandemic, after being so socially distant and being away from each other, joining this group again doesn't seem like something far out of reach for me or something that couldn't happen. And I really, I think that what everyone else brings to the table, I really hope that everyone continues to work well with each other, because that's what I think is really important, is that everyone comes to see everybody for what they're saying, and how they're saying it, and work together and have a common goal of making the community better and making there more writing available. And the one thing that I would tell everyone to do is if people say join the rides or go out to do a ride with somebody, definitely do it. I did at least one with the Bethel School Group, doing the Safe Routes to Kids, and it was just such a fun time. And so learning about all those other things that are contributing to this, the Sunday streets, that was really fun. I got to participate in that the last year that we had it, not this last year because it was canceled, but the one before that. That's such a great event, so I hope that continues. And if I can be a volunteer, even if not part of the community or committee to be part of the volunteers on that, I would definitely do that in a heartbeat.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. And Robbie?
Yeah, I really wish I was there with, well, I guess nobody's there, but we were in the same place together. Yeah, kind of like what Nick was saying, this last year is, it's been pretty strange, but I'm glad to see that we were still able to, get something done. And I think, moving forward, some things that are possibly, I've been kind of reflecting on the past 4 years. And I think that, we got a lot of things done. But then there are a lot of things that when I first came on 4 years ago that we were talking about, and we're still talking about it. And so I think, maybe some room for improvement in the future. And I wish I would have thought of this earlier in my tenure on here, but is to maybe just be a little bit more deliberate and, kind of have a goal. I think it's really good to talk about things, but if it doesn't come to any sort of conclusion, then when the next people come into the committee the next year, then it gets talked about again. So I don't know, it might be a good idea for folks that are coming back next year to just kind of maybe take the next month or so and kind of think about one or two, really maybe even 3 important things that you hope to accomplish in the upcoming year, and bring it to the committee, and maybe kind of formulate a plan of how we can get these things accomplished throughout the year, so that when the year is over, you can kind of look back and see what you're able to do and were unable to do, and then go from there for the next year. But yeah, this is a great group of people, a great community, people that are really passionate about active transportation. And I think it's a really sort of positive thing that Eugene has. And I think one other maybe sort of piece of advice to some of the folks on the committee, don't be afraid to ruffle some feathers. I mean, this committee is supposed to be a citizens advisory committee, and kind of our job is to advise city staff. And I've never gotten any indication at all from anybody on city staff that they don't like the input, and everything's been encouraging of input. They want to know that what they're doing is, something that the population supports and is going to help people. And so don't be afraid to give them that feedback, even if it's negative and there's room for improvement. And, I'm sure, was it Bob that said this? I'll be tuning into future meetings and following along. And then I don't know what the whole turnaround is before I could come back on the committee again. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Yeah, and I guess lastly, thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Thanks, Robbie. So I guess it's my turn. It's a bittersweet moment. I've really enjoyed my time on the committee. I feel like staff is extremely responsive to the things that we've brought up. And in the 4 years that I've been on, I have seen things that have developed within this committee actually happen on the streets of Eugene. And it's pretty amazing because there are a lot of committees. I've worked in government for over 20 years. Anyway, and I have been on other committees as a staff member, and what this staff does and the amount of time that they give to this committee is truly amazing, and I really do appreciate that. The diversity on this group has been really good for me. I've commuted by bike almost my whole entire life, and I'm a former bike racer, so I'm a little aggressive, I guess, when I'm out there. I'm used to being in traffic. I'm used to being with cars. And it's really good for me to hear the people who really want to be on their bike, but aren't maybe that comfortable with traffic and, won't zip out behind, a truck and, zip along with traffic because, you feel safe there. They feel the complete opposite. So I really appreciate all of the insights that I've gotten from the other committee members that I've had the privilege to work with these 4 years. So one of the things I guess I wish we would have seen more during the time that I was on the committee was a little more engagement with our city council. We've talked about it a few times about having members of the committee speak as community members to the city council and really try to advocate as members of the ATC, but speaking as a member of the community, some of the things that we really feel are important so that they hear our voice. We've heard over and over again how little money is dedicated to our bike path maintenance, and we always have to find money in other ways. And we've, Reed has done an amazing job in, finding those avenues for us. But again, I think that if we had a bigger voice as, the pedestrian, bicycling, active transportation community with the council, that could really be helpful, something that they need to hear. So I'm sure you'll see me again. And, Alan's someone who was left for a year and ended up coming back. So, I know that we're all really passionate about the things that we deal with here. And so, I look forward to continuing to work with you even as a member of the community and not a member of the committee. So thanks everyone for the opportunity to do this for the last 4 years.
Yeah, thanks, Bob, and thanks, members. Thanks, Robbie, Bob, Marina, who may check in later, but who we've talked to in the community for years and years, who finally said, I would like to be on that committee and do a little bit more. And to Nick, of course, too, who's representing an area or a neighborhood that we don't hear from folks a whole lot. So thank you for stepping up, Bob and Robbie, and being part of our chair. I mean, that is something that is putting yourself out there, and we so appreciate that. One of the reasons that we attend these meetings and spend time on it is because we think there's a lot of value in hearing directly from the community. And we want to make sure that the projects that we are planning are projects that you want, and aren't just things that we're doing because we're supposed to do something. And I like this form of feedback. I like this committee. I like how frank we are in our conversations. I like, as Robbie said, ruffling feathers. It's okay to say that this thing isn't very good. Sue Walling in her letter today said, hey, I know you guys worked really hard on this, but it's not great. We heard that. We are hearing that. So thank you. And thanks for letting us know how it's going out there. I mean, that's the other part is I know what my experience is when I travel around the community. Staff knows sort of what's going on, but I want to hear from folks, as Bob mentioned, that aren't like me and what their experience is. And the best way I know to do that is to ask people directly. And the fact that you guys show up every month to tell us how it's going, I think is really valuable. And we're going to be committed to this for as long as you folks are willing to talk to us about how it's going out there, and help us be more responsive to things, because we want to spend time on things that are going to have value. So this committee is really important in helping us set those agendas. Thank you.
All right. If no one else has any further comments, I think we can move on. We're ahead of schedule right now. So we are at 6:05, which is one full agenda piece ahead of schedule. So update on committee recruitment.
Bob, just really quick, I just wanted to echo some of what Reed said, but also just add on to that, because I think it's important. It's valuable to hear, your feedback about how, your time on here was, but I think it's also important that we really highlight our gratefulness for you and your time that you put into this committee, and from subcommittee meetings and reviewing plans, or sort of watching things beyond just this meeting time, and then on top of that, this meeting time and setting that time aside, and it is really valuable. And the feedback that you give us on infrastructure projects and programmatic pieces, these matter. And, we want to hear from a diverse mix of people. And that's why we try and, have it be, not just a committee of people who ride bikes all the time, but, that we're trying to bring in those interests of different user groups and sort of ability levels and usage types. And so just, it's really important to us, and your time is really valuable, and I just want to give my gratitude and appreciation to you all that have committed that time. So thank you.
Yeah, some of you might not know, but Shane was a member of this committee at one point, and he loved it so much he joined the city so he could do it.
That's right.
All right, Lee, you want to go ahead with the recruitment update?
Sure. So tomorrow is the deadline for applying to be on the committee for the next 2 years. We have received 23 applications so far. That's a really good number of applicants. And in fact, 3 this afternoon. So we're going to be reviewing the applications next week, and then set up some interviews. We want to have a diverse committee, and hopefully that will be the case, and not just in the usual categories, but just the type of people that are there. If you can't look around the room, but if you think about the people you've been working with the last couple of years, you all brought something different to the committee. And so we'll be looking for that too. So we can have up to 7 new members. There'll be 8 members continuing from this existing committee. And so we should have up to 7 new members by January 14th. And I think one thing that I learned from this recruitment phase is I should have been better about letting the committee know all the things that Kelsey and I were doing to get the word out, and to make it a little bit easier for the committee members to help us, spread the word. And so I'll make sure that next time the details will be given to the committee.
Hey, Lee, I want to highlight that we did get a question from Alpha about the if there are any applicants from the west side. So I think it's Churchill area neighbors or far west. And I don't know if you've done the spreadsheets yet based off the 24.
No, I haven't filled it out yet. I'm working on it. I was working on it today. So I probably won't know until the end of the day tomorrow. Mm-hmm. I don't remember anyone from kind of out west. So maybe Alpha could use the Churchill area neighbors Facebook page to, she's already done it once, but maybe she can do another reminder. Oh, she did it.
Yeah. So, yeah, we definitely, you know, are always struggling to get representation in the Bethel, Northeast, Far West neighborhoods. So I know that, you know, Lee's done outreach to neighborhood groups and different organizations to try and increase that diversity as well, because we definitely are try to mix, you know, the geographic diversity of the members as well as much as we can, racial, experiential, mode diversity. So.
Shane, I have, there is one applicant from the Churchill area neighbors. Somebody lives in the apartments on Bailey Hill Road.
Okay, great. Looks like Grace has her hand up.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you could tell us a little bit more about the selection process, since we have more applicants than positions.
Yeah, so we look at, you know, the diversity of the people that are on the existing committee. And I did do one spreadsheet today where I put in where everyone lived that's continuing on. So at least geographically, we can look at that. One of the things, you know, we extended it 1 month and we got a bunch of new applicants, including some more women, which I thought was really good, because with 1 week to go, we only had 2 women that applied. So, you know, we want to try to make it as diverse as we can. You know, I think maybe you brought it up, Grace, but there was something I got from Shane and Kelsey was a list of all the emails from all the bike shops and the bike groups and things, and I was able to send that out. And because of COVID, you know, we didn't want to go knocking on all the doors. So we did get a couple people from the bike business that applied.
Yeah, I reached out to all the bike shops as well, and also to all of the people that use the community gardens, which is, you know, all over the city. There was that went out to, you know, probably a few hundred people.
I will make a report about how people heard about it, and I'll send that to the committee, because that was one of the things we asked. In Motion is one of our biggest ways to reach out to people.
And Lee, beyond the sort of usual suspects of the bike shops and people who subscribed in Motion and our Facebook and social media pieces, there were some specific outreach to organizations that Kelsey and you did as well, right?
Yes, there were several groups that represent people, seniors and people with disabilities that I regularly contact. So I have all their emails, I sent them emails, and also some groups that represent different minority groups that I was able to send them the information twice.
And then Grace, you know, what we do when we have more applicants than there are spaces, and even when we, you know, have fewer applicants is we meet as a team, certain members of the team, and Kelsey and Cass will be part of that committee as well, reviewing those applicants. And so we'll go through and sort of look at this, the spreadsheet of the different demographic pieces, different locations, and try and balance the committee based off of sort of that makeup. And then if we still have more people than there are spaces after we do some of that balancing, we'll do interviews and some one-on-ones with people to see sort of, you know, how that they might represent an organization or a group or area better than another. If it seems like, oh, these people seem like they, you know, check a lot of the boxes that are the same, let's talk to them and and evaluate that from that point.
Okay. Anything else, Adley?
I think that's it.
Okay. Well, I noticed that Marina has joined us. And Marina, I know this is also your last meeting. In the last agenda item, we were kind of letting each of the departing members just give a little information about their time on the committee, the things that they liked, the things that they would like to leave with the committee. And I would like to give you the opportunity to share your thoughts if you would like before we move on to the next item, since we are a little bit ahead of time.
Okay, can you hear me?
Sure can.
You can?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Well, it was a pleasure to serve in the committee, but I feel that I was not as productive as I could have been. And maybe many other things were coming through that I was focusing on instead of subjects or matters related to the committee, but were things that I needed to take care. And I just feel that at this time, at this point in time in my life, I need to take care also of my future as an artist and get my work ahead, and that implies to take less. I don't have the available time for committees that are not related to what I want to accomplish in the future, but I am interested in participating and collaborating with the city to improve the safety on the streets. So I just feel like I wish I could have accomplished more as a member of the committee. But I'll be there to volunteer in some of the city events in the future. And I may come back later when I have a better direction of where I'm heading to. I became a member of the public art committee of the city, but it's in the trajectory towards where I want to go. I think I had put aside my persona for a while, and I'm coming back to that. And as I said, try to secure a future in what I do for myself, yes, in the future. So, but as I said, I may come back later in the future. And I want to thank everybody it was a great learning experience.
Well, thank you, Marina. I am really glad that you were able to attend this meeting, because it would have been sad to not be able to say goodbye to you, and that really appreciated being able to work with you while you were on the committee. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right. So the next item on the agenda is the bike share RFP request for proposal, and presented by Shane. That's what it says.
Great, thanks. Yep, that's what it says. That's what it is. Yeah, and this is in a way a little bit premature, but I also didn't want to wait till January because we just closed the RFP process like this afternoon, and so we just received those proposals, and I can say that we received 3 of them. And so next week we are meeting with our partners to evaluate those proposals. And so, I won't be able to disclose much, one, because I haven't had time to review them because we just got them this afternoon. So I'm really excited to review those. I'll be doing that this week, and as well as the partners. And so we will be meeting next week to go through those and our different scoring and evaluations that we're doing with those. Josh, I think we'll probably see those. I think his supervisor, Dave Reeser from U of O Transportation is one of those partners, and then LTD and Peace Health are all part of the process. And so then Reed and I will take that input from our partners, and we'll be meeting with leadership at the city and our supervisors, and making a decision of who the city will be contracting with, and sort of what the structure is. So we'll see what the business plan is that's presented to us, and then once we make a selection, start the process around contracting with them, and getting to the point where we can make an official announcement at least. And my goal is to have operations hopefully by March 1st, taken over by the new operator. We'll see how the timeline goes with legal on both sides. But it is pretty exciting to know that we have three, what I think are going to be pretty solid proposals. And so I'm pretty excited about reviewing those. I think we have some good input from ATC, but want to have some time this evening to sort of, as you've had more time to think on it, if there's more that you want to sort of comment on or give some input on before we go through these final evaluations. And hopefully by January, I can have some good information to share about what those proposals were and sort of where we are with that a little bit more. Related to that, I also just wanted to mention that there are a couple other parallel pieces that are going on. We have some statewide bike share pieces that are happening, in that PBOT, Portland Bureau of Transportation, is getting rid of their sort of 1.0 version of the bikes from Biketown, and because they've upgraded their system to e-bikes and changed their operator. And so they have, I think it was 800 bikes and some of those bikes are in storage with ODOT, and they are working with ODOT and going through a process where they will disperse those bikes. And I've been involved, and Josh was on a call as well, hearing what they plan to do with those bikes. There are a lot of nonprofits and organizations that are interested in receiving those bikes because they will be donations. But there are definitely a lot of limitations on how they can be used. You know, they're really made for bike share. They need to be integrated into some sort of system. And how that integration happens will be, could be a little difficult if they're just small operations and they're not working with a larger nonprofit. PBOT has an interest in doing as few contracts as possible to be able to get rid of them. So I think they're looking to work with one or a couple of nonprofits who then can get these bikes out. And I share that because it is related to our bike share. And we have had questions of, are we asking for any of those bikes? And we are not. Mostly because they're a different version of our bikes. We're a sort of 2.0 version that isn't electrified, but has that capacity and just a different sort of system. We're chain drive, and that's a direct drive system. Some of the hardware is just different, and we wouldn't want to have different bikes that our mechanics have to deal with different kinds of parts. And so that's one of the reasons. But I think that there are some overlaps that could happen, and it could be very interesting if some of these other nonprofits have use of these bikes and how they might integrate with our system. So it's definitely something that we're keeping our eye on, and could have a major role in what we do with bike share and how it connects to something that might happen throughout the state. ODOT is funding a project and with the potential of connecting to a statewide system. So on another sort of hardware note, we did receive the controllers. I think I mentioned that last time. A new prototype controller that is much smoother than our current push button system, and we are able to we utilize that. Our field techs have used it, really like it. The interaction that you have with it is a lot smoother than our current one. Using either a smartphone or a card, you can use an RFID card or your smartphone to unlock the bike just using a QR code. So it's touchless, so it's a little less germy as well, and just a smoother operation. We are hoping to purchase those sooner rather than later. There's a 90-day period from when we place the order to when we can receive them, and that might line up nicely with a new operator so that we could do a launch with a new operator and new controllers about the same time. And then looking even further beyond from that, we are going to make a request. We are making a request for funding from STIF, which is the, oh boy, Josh, you might have to help me on this one.
Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if transit was in there or not, but it is transit funding, and that is dispersed regionally, and Josh serves on advisory committee for that. And we have talked to LTD about the potential of making an ask for our bike share system to receive some of the transit funds that come to our region. And they are open to that, and we are applying for those funds. And just to give you an idea, our ask is around expanding and improving our bike share. And so this will allow us to sort of set the stage for a new operator and really set them up for success by gathering some funds to increase access and equity by providing free low-income memberships, expanding the service with LTD connectivity, and that could most likely be around increasing the number of bikes and stations, and then a marketing push around sort of the new controllers, the new operator, system upgrades, low-income fares, and all that we're doing to expand the system and grow it in 2021 and beyond. And so that this funding won't kick in until 2022, but we think that there's some good timing there in expanding the system once this new operator gets things rolling strong again. And then there is a piece in there about working with the new operator on lowering the age limit. It's currently set at 18. I'd like us to be able to open that up to 16. That's happening in some other communities. And we are actually talking about the STIF funds are currently undersubscribed. And so we are talking about other ways to improve the system and other transit funds that we might be able to utilize from these. And so we're going to be meeting with the partners to talk about that a little bit more in depth. And so we are floating some other ideas that aren't on this list. So I just wanted to put that out there and let you know about those pieces. And let's see, I see your hand up, Grace, and I will get to you. I just want to see back in my notes here if there was anything else I wanted to touch on. No, I think that's good. So, Grace?
Very exciting news. Thank you for the update. I'm curious if there's been any conversation recently with Springfield in talks about expanding the system and if that could be on the table.
That was one of the questions from the STIF committee as well. And I think a lot of that will be determined based off of the operator that we choose. And I think that we know that there's interest from Springfield, and our partners recognize that, and Peace Health is interested in that. in some format. Yeah, so I think that it's still definitely on the table, how it's structured, and that is one of the funding pieces that I'm going to be talking to our partners about when we talk about the other STIF funds that might be available. And I think it was Josh or Daniel and then Alan. So Josh or Daniel.
I'll go first. I was just curious if the cards that are compatible with the new controllers are also compatible with LTD's TouchPass cards, if not for FAIR, at the very least for like recognizing the cards for potential future integration.
That is a good question. I need to find out. I know that they are supposedly more, they are, what am I trying to say? They're more effective than the current system. The current system has a certain type of RFID card or cards that it can utilize, and that these new controllers allow more types of RFID cards. Like I know that the current one, we can't use our city ID and the type of RFID that it is, but supposedly this new controller can. And so I do know that there is some growth in that, but I'm not sure if it aligns with that. So that's a good question that I will look into.
So as far as the RFP process, Shane, will you have more to share with us in the future before a decision is made?
That's another good question. We don't have a definitive timeline yet, and I'm not sure, and maybe Reed can speak to this a little bit about, I do know that it will probably take a little bit longer. Well, what is the date of our next meeting? January, what? Anyone know?
14.
January 14th. Yeah, I'm thinking with the holidays, it may not be until then that we have a decision, because we have to go to leadership as well.
So our process allows us to move directly into contracting. And so just based on who we end up selecting and how quickly we can get moving, it may not be that we come back to the ATC and talk about this before we decide to do that. We're letting a lot of that selection conversation happen between the university, LTD, Peace Health, and the city of Eugene. And then the city has the final word on who to select, but we want to make sure our partners are happy. And of course, we'll talk with Peace Health as well, because they're an important partner in all of this. And our goal is to get that new operator on board as soon as possible. So every week we delay is another week or two that, we are taking on this burden, and it is costing us money to run the system. So our objective is to get this off the books and to get our operator in place as soon as possible. So we'll see how this shakes out. And as Shane said, we'll come back in January and tell you where we are at in the process, but I can't promise that we'll talk to you before we make a final decision.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. And I think that it makes it more important for folks to sort of speak up now about what are the key pieces that you want to make sure are a part of that selection process, so that when we go into it, we know, like, oh, we heard this from the community.
Thank you for all your hard work on this. I'm really delighted to see that there are operators stepping up. I was afraid that there wasn't going to be any, and then the whole thing would come crashing. So a couple of questions. First, there was discussion a month or two ago about prioritizing operators that might also take on other systems throughout the state to make more of a network. Is that still something that's in the conversation? And then the second question is there talk about making the bikes compatible or replacing the fleet at some point with e-bikes, or where do e-bikes potentially fit into this sometime in the future?
I'll let Reed, I'm sure Reed has some thoughts on that, but I'll give my bit first. I think that to me, e-bikes haven't proven themselves out yet in a system like ours. They have proven themselves out to work in a system that is, very capital intensive and funded by capital venture funds. But it hasn't proven out in a sponsorship model to a city of our scale, operations of our scale yet that I've seen. I think that that's definitely possible as the technology and the system improvements occur with bike share. I definitely don't think it's off the table, and it's something that I've already, started thinking about for our next round of STIF funding, that at that point we might be ready to, retire our fleet and transition to an e-bike fleet. But I think that, our system in its scale and operations works really well as a non-e-bike standard bike fleet. But I think that we're also open to other, potentials in the future of e-bikes. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and the cost per trip are also higher. And so that's something we need to evaluate in terms of our equity strategies. So yeah, we'll have to see what is available in the market for e-bikes for systems like ours. And that market is pretty small. But it's possible, and we'll see what happens. I'm just very concerned about the maintenance that is required. You have to touch every bike every day to make sure that the batteries are charged, versus the bikes we have now can go a couple of weeks until something fails on it, or it's just part of our regular scheduled maintenance. And so we can keep a much smaller fleet crew on staff and provide more of the money that we get in sponsorship into programming and low-income fares and things like that. So it's part of that is, what direction do we want the bike share fleet, to be directed, and where should that happen? And is expansion more important than e-bikes? I don't know. We'll see where the market is in another 6 months. It could all be different.
Yeah, and then just really quickly on your question about the statewide piece, I touched on that briefly. That is still a discussion that's happening, and some of that is related to the RFP process, and so I don't want to go into too much depth, but there are some statewide conversations that are happening and with different partners, and that there is some overlap with our systems. So potential, but there are 3 proposals, and all 3 of them, could bring really different positives and things that we need to evaluate. So.
Thanks for the well thought out answers.
Looks like Grace and Steve.
Go ahead, Steve. I'll go after.
Okay, yeah, I think what you said about the capital costs and about the maintenance of the e-bikes makes a lot of sense, and your thoughts are really well founded there. I would just echo, though, I would just suggest, if it's possible, to find a way to do some level of small e-bike test in the fleet at the earliest possible date, and only because it's becoming such a popular venue. The e-bikes are becoming so popular. It would be a shame if usage started to fall off because the wave of popularity exceeds the fleet that we have available. And that's something that could creep up on us. So that's just my thought.
And I'm just curious if, as the ATC, we want to kind of vote on anything or make any motions tonight in support of prioritizing anything, since staff might be making a decision before we next meet. And my thought process there is, I'm really interested in increasing access to the system, so broadening the system area. I do think that the possibility to expand into Springfield would be a big positive for our region. So I would be in support of something like that, and I'm curious if the rest of the members are interested in something along those lines as well.
Does anyone have any comments related to Grace's suggestion?
I will note previously we did pass a motion encouraging the city or supporting the city in exploring a statewide system. So that is something we have done already. Yeah. I guess I feel a little bit weird about urging the city to do something. They are in an RFP process, and so they've got pretty specific review guidelines that they're supposed to follow for government procurement. And so I mean, we could absolutely pass something, but they may not be able to follow that recommendation. I'm not sure. I'd look to someone actually on the review committee to comment on that.
You know, and also just us making comments here during this agenda item is information that staff will take on board. I know that there is a comment from Alpha about also expansion west of Lawrence. I know personally I would be in favor of the city increasing access to parts of the city that are currently outside of the boundaries. You know, I live up in the River Road area. You know, we have the new LTD complex that's going in right here. You know, so some expansion would certainly be something that I would like to see even within the city itself. But again, I know the priority for the city is to get someone else on board who can take the burden off of the city, which never really wanted in the first place to be the you know, primary bike share vendor. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
And I know Daniel has his hand raised, so I'll let him speak. But I also want to just highlight that we definitely, you know, want this time to be a time that we hear from you. And we'll take that into consideration in our process, but I definitely want to empower you as well. If you feel like there's something, you know, that you feel really strongly in as a committee that you know, want to make a motion, like you're the advisory committee. And if you choose to do that, you can do that, you know, whether, you know, we take that into full consideration or, you know, we'll take it into consideration, but, you know, like Josh says, there's a certain RFP process we have to follow, but, you know, part of it is we want to know what the community wants, and you're advisory to that. So, yeah, I'll leave it up to you what level you want in that. And if, you know, and I think that motions are like that are especially helpful when you feel like staff isn't focused enough in the direction you want. You want to make it clear that it should be a little bit more focused in a certain direction. So yeah, I feel like I'll leave that in your hands. But I also wanted to highlight that there are some comments in the chat about the RFID technology piece that's kind of interesting. So thanks for that, Josh. And LTD planning. Daniel?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to address the cost and, like, you know, capital supporting bike share systems and expanding the network and upgrading to e-bikes. All of these sort of concerns. Yeah, something we discussed when we initially talked about this a few months ago was just, you know, I do not think that a bike share system or really any transit system could or even should be supported entirely by ridership income. You know, these sorts of systems, you know, add access to folks who live, you know, outside of the urban core, to the types of people who, you know, could not or would not otherwise ride a bike, and build wealth for the city and generate revenues indirectly. And so we absolutely should not measure the costs against just the income generated by ridership, because that is only a small fraction of the wealth added to the city by bike share.
Great, thank you for that one. And Pete?
Yeah, I was just thinking about what the conundrum of we have this evaluation process going on, and I appreciate is trying to do, and I think that there's room for that maybe in the contracting when you're actually writing your contract and working with your partners to actually put that together, and maybe doesn't necessarily need a motion tonight, but as we get further along, we could do that, then urge through the contracting process to include those things. Just a thought.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's a good point.
Do we have any other comments, discussion?
For me, it's seeing as the making motions is one of the things that we can easily do as a committee. I don't see a harm in doing it. So I would like to make a motion for the city to prioritize an operator who is interested in expanding the system for increased equity and connectivity in their decision-making process.
Do we have a second?
I might just, say, what do we mean by expand? Because of course there's geographic expansion, and then there's also the talk about expanding to other networks.
I would start with focusing on geographic.
Could we say Springfield specifically, or do we want to say West Eugene and Springfield?
I also do like that we already made the motion.
And Grace, we've sort of lost you. You're frozen right now. We're not getting any audio.
And maybe it might be helpful to have something, if there's a potential of typing it into the chat, might help form the wording of it a little bit too. I do think, yeah, it'd be good to maybe have some clarity of what that sort of expansion is. Is that also expansion of the fleet, and yeah, or calling out what the specific part is that you're asking about?
Shane or Lee, do you recall which meeting exactly we did the last motion at? Nick made a good point. Maybe we should read out what that motion was, and this one might be different. And
Yeah.
hopefully Grace can come back in, because that will be very important.
Yeah, and she put in, oh, it looks like, oh, Reed put in motion for the city to prioritize an operator who focuses on geographic expansion and equity. Is that, Reed, what your reading of Grace's motion was?
Yes.
Grace wrote yes, what
Okay.
Reed typed works.
Okay.
So
Yes, that works.
okay.
Great. And then Lee, were you looking up the previous meeting? It might have been the October one. I am
looking it up.
Okay.
Okay. So while Lee's doing that, I'm just going to reiterate what I see has happened. Grace has put a motion forward for the city to prioritize an operator who focuses on geographic expansion and equity. I don't believe we've had a second on it yet.
I seconded.
Okay, so Steve has seconded. Maybe give Lee a moment to see if he can find the last one before we have the vote, and maybe if anyone else has any other comments. Josh, go ahead. Oh, I see Alan too. You got your hand up, so you can go ahead.
To Daniel's point, did we want to be specific about this being in Eugene as opposed to Springfield, or is leaving it open the more important part?
And Alan, do you want to add your comment?
I- While I appreciate the sentiment of the motion, I'm concerned that there might be other factors that might be favorable to the overall operation of the network that we as committee members aren't aware of, and to ask staff to prioritize just expansion and equity may not be looking at the whole picture. So I would probably stand aside on this motion, not knowing all the other important factors that need to be considered.
Also say, I trust city staff to make the right
You're breaking
judgment
up.
in terms of the process, and would like to advocate for what I.
Grace, we lost you again. You dropped off. Steve, I see your hand is up.
I'm not sure procedurally, but I was going to suggest that the motion be amended to say that staff prioritize to the extent possible within the logical parameters of the RFP, equity and geographic expansion.
Josh, go ahead.
So I had the very good privilege to be involved in a lot of the initial talk about expansion when Uber was operating the system. And I always felt that there was not an emphasis from them as an operator on expanding, because they were very profit driven and they were interested in operating in the University of Oregon area where all the ridership was. And so I do think there's value in emphasizing expansion over other things. But to Alan's point, you've got limited dollars to spend. Are you going to spend them on expanding the system, which means more bikes and more stations? Or are you going to spend it on electric bicycles? Or are you going to spend it on, say, fare reduction? There are other priorities that you can choose. I do think expansion is an important one, because the system as it is now only really serves downtown, and it's leaving a lot of the community out.
Steve, is your hand up again, or just stay up from earlier?
I don't think it's up.
Okay, I went back. I went back down. My feelings on the motion are, I understand the point, Grace, that you want to make. I personally am not confident that we need to make a motion to get our point across to staff as to what is important to us. And honestly, I would like them to be able to make their decision based on how best to keep bike share alive and thrive in Eugene. And if that is a vendor who is a strong vendor, but feels more along the lines of what the former social bikes people were thinking, that they needed to focus on where they could get ridership and subscriptions, then I would really want that to be something that it overrides a vendor who might have lofty plans and believe that, yeah, sure, I want to expand, and then back out in 2 years because they're losing money hand over fist, or they feel like they can't continue as a vendor. So my feelings on the motion would be that I wouldn't be for it. So Lee, were you able to find the last motion that we made? And if not,
and
okay.
I'm not sure if Lee was able to or not, but I have been poking around and could not find it in the notes.
Okay.
So curious if I'm just missing that, or if we thought there was a motion made and we didn't capture it, or if I'm just
There
missing it.
was, I wrote it. It should be in there. I don't know what month it was.
Okay, I might have looked in the wrong one.
All right.
So.
I think just for the sake of time, because we are now over on our time, we have a motion on the table. It has been seconded. I'm going to scroll up on the chat again. So the motion on the table is for the city to prioritize an operator who focuses on geographic expansion and equity. I'm going to now open this up for a vote. Everyone who is for, if they could put their thumbs up. I'm going to assume Grace's thumb is up. So I have Nick, Robbie, Josh, Julie, Steve, Adria, did you? Okay, and Daniel has thumbs up. Anyone who is opposed? I'm going to list myself as opposed. Pete as opposed. And then for the sake of clarity, everyone who is abstaining.
So I just want to remind you of how, because we haven't voted on a motion in a little while, that had any, that we are operating under a consensus model. And so the general procedure is that you get a feel for where everyone is at.
Okay.
You ask for people's response, and they can either give a thumbs up, a thumbs sideways, which means further discussion, or a thumbs down, which is block. And if it's a block to the motion, then there also needs to be discussion, and you need to work with that person until some consensus can be reached, or that the motion is removed from the table.
Okay, yeah, we haven't had a motion that hasn't just flowed through before for quite some time.
Yeah. So we did see a couple blocks and some people who were uncertain and would like further discussion on it. So I just want to.
And we could still, in the consensus model, we could still have people who choose to not block or have further discussion, but simply not give a thumbs up.
There, yes, you could abstain from voting as well.
So thank you, Shane, for that. And with that clarification, I'm going to call the vote again. And we could either vote thumbs up to approve the motion, thumbs sideways to continue discussion, and anyone who wants to block the motion would put a thumbs down, and that also could continue the discussion. If you wish to not vote, you do not need to raise your hand. So again, a vote for the motion for the city to prioritize an operator who focuses on geographic expansion and equity is on the table. And if everyone could vote either for further discussion or block, I ask you to vote now. And Alan is open for further discussion. Everyone else that has voted to. Okay, Alan, so has kept it open for further discussion. You're muted, Alan.
I do have a question, actually. I was curious what the breakdown was in terms of the vendors being for-profit or nonprofit right now. I was kind of curious.
Two are for-profit and one is nonprofit.
Okay.
Oh, Nick, if you're trying to say something, we can't hear you.
I don't particularly have anything more to discuss. I think I shared my concerns earlier, and they are still of concern. And I think other people expressed those concerns even better than I did. So.
Pete?
Yeah, I just want to say that I didn't vote because I've kind of felt like that I didn't want to block it. But I think that this it's a little on the vague side, and I think that it's just a little. I think the timing is off when you have an RFP, which we haven't seen as a group. We haven't even seen what the proposals have come across, and I feel like it's muddying the waters for the staff to make a good decision if it is based on the RFP that actually went out, and they do have to score these things based on that. But I didn't want to block it to either, so that the committee could still make a statement about the desire to have expansion.
Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess if anything, I wish the wording of the motion was something on the order that, it's the sense of the committee that we would ask the staff to give consideration or give strong consideration. I don't think, without knowing the full details of the RFP and all the other considerations, I don't think we can send the message that this should be the highest priority, but it's a consideration.
Grace, would you consider that as a friendly amendment to your motion to change the wording to add consideration?
She said yes.
Yes, okay. Any further discussion? I guess I'd be more comfortable with, moving forward with consideration added to the wording. I think that the people who have concerns have voiced those concerns. Those are part of the record, and we still have, Shane, do you know if we need a second on a friendly amendment?
I think that you need to check in with the person who seconded to make sure that they're still okay with the.
I seconded, and I'm more than okay.
Yeah.
He seconded, and he offered
the friendly amendment.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put this up again. Hopefully we can move forward after this. That the motion on the table is for the city to put consideration into prioritizing an operator who focuses on geographic expansion and equity. Go ahead and vote along the same lines as before, either for move forward or abstain. Okay, we're in consensus that is our motion. Thank you, Grace and Steve, for your input on that, and everyone for, I thought was a very good discussion on that. Moving forward, our next item is Move Huge survey. Shane?
Great. Well, it's okay that we ran over a little bit because I also don't have as much on this topic as I had hoped to. As you all know, those of you who took the survey, we did have about 20 people who took it, a mix of partners, ATC members, and staff. And I know that it was a major investment in time to go through it. I know because I created it and I've been going through responses on it. As mentioned before, there are 63 action items from our Active Transportation and Strategic Plan and Move Huge. And it has been helpful for me already to go through it and see sort of where people are on these different pieces. I don't have a report back yet because it is a lot of data, and I've had some other pieces on the plate as well. But my plan is to utilize that information that you gave me in putting together as part of our report that will give a summary of where we are in our Move Huge plan. The way that Kelsey Moore and I are approaching the Move Huge report that we're doing now and sort of moving us forward into this next plan of the Active Transportation Strategic Plan is to think about where are we on these 63 action items now after 5 years. So in the past, we've sort of looked year by year of how did we do this last year? But we want to go sort of all the way back to the beginning up to now, what have we done? Where do you as the community feel like we are on this? Where do we as staff feel like we are? Is it still a priority? Is it something that we can combine with something else? And then take that knowledge and put it into our next action plan. I think that, as I've said before, there is a lot that's changed on the ground and just in the world in these past few years, especially in our active transportation and transportation options world, from implementing bike share to COVID to an increased connection with the University of Oregon and their sort of transportation focus that they have now, and the funding that we're putting into infrastructure changes and the sort of shifting of our regional transportation options programs and dollars. And so all of these major changes will be working themselves out over this next year. And it'll be really important to keep checking in and talking to ATC over these next few months and even this next year to talk about what are the things that are actually coming out as, you know, we get this new operator in, our regional transportation options program changes, and we are starting to, you know, implement these infrastructure changes. We're really looking internally at what these programs look like. And, you know, we've been talking internally of, you know, does Sunday Streets still make sense? And especially the way that we have been doing it. You know, it's very time intensive. It's a great program, but is it getting us to the mode share that we need to? Do we have the kind of program that could replace that to get us to that mode share that we want to? A big part of Sunday Streets has always been using it as a format to talk to the community about how we use our public space and to help people think about that our streets as used in a different way. And I think that when we started doing Sunday Streets, that was really important. I still think it's important. I still think that there's a lot of people who need that conversation, but we as a city are starting to make those changes. We're doing some pretty major changes to our streets and have, you know, sort of that work going into what we're doing in a way that we didn't have before. You know, when we launched 13th Avenue, when we're starting to do outreach now on High Street and all these other projects, and then we need to promote them and educate people on them and get people to use them. Those are signature pieces of projects similar to our 1972 river path system. And when it went in, I think it's going to be transformational for what our street structure is and how people utilize it. And we as a team, as a city, need to have people thinking about and utilizing those spaces. And we need to promote them. And so I think that means a change in how we do programming. And so, you know, your input is going to be valuable in that. And I just want to sort of frame that of this is what we're thinking about. And what do you think, you know, sort of knowing that and thinking about that, what do you think we should be thinking about and talking about? You know, when COVID hit and other communities were putting in slow streets programs, you know, having ATC and the community pushing us and asking about that was an important part of how we formed, you know, that program and how we shifted things. And so your continued, you know, input and evaluation on these is going to be continue to be important. So just want to highlight that I don't have, you know, the set information that I want to present to you now about what I've learned so far, but that those are the kind of conversations that we're having internally and that we're starting to think about in how we present our programs and how we think about them. And I'd love to hear sort of your thoughts on that and sort of that changing landscape.
You go ahead.
Question, Shane, I know you've done outreach to us to do this, complete the survey, and also other community members. Is it widely available? The people that are on the call as participants tonight, would they be able to go take that survey?
No, it's not the kind of survey that I would ask the community to take. It's really, it's a half hour at least survey. And I think it was more valuable to me to dive into it and have people who were bought into it as the ATC, as partners, and as staff to give input on it. I think that there's another process that will occur as we start to hone what those programs will look like that will involve more community outreach when we create a new plan. But I think for sort of getting the read on this current plan, it's a little bit less outward facing.
Great, thanks for that. I think when you get to that point, as we sort of discussed in the program subcommittee, it'd be helpful to have a bit of a cheat sheet for people who are taking the survey to say, here's this, what we think our scorecard is, because a number of these things are programmatic and some things are physical improvements that you see in the street, so it's easy to respond. Other things are programmatic, so unless you're dialed in to what's happening, you probably don't know. And so it's good to have some summary of here's what we've done, like the 2017 summary. Here's what's happened up till now so that people can respond.
Yeah, and my hope is that we have, a good move huge report that will give people an idea of what we've done. And I think in some of that, there will be information about, and this is what we're thinking, like we might, take this off and this is why. If you think we should bring it back, tell us why, or what do you think we're missing in this? And I think that'll definitely be a process after we sort of give our summary.
Does anybody else have any comments for Shane?
Looks like Josh and then Andrea.
I'd be interested once you have a chance to crunch through some of the results to have a longer conversation with this committee on it, because I think it's pretty important. I think we've done a lot of awesome things on our streets, but the comments we got about 13th Avenue earlier says you can't just build it and then walk away. There's more work to do. So I definitely welcome a longer conversation.
Adria?
Yeah, it was interesting taking the survey. There are a lot of projects, and I thought, there are definitely maybe some ways to combine things. But what I really came away from reading through all of it was that it's a lot of things for staff to do and for this committee to try to reach out to people to do as well. And it seems like creating better community partners that can also help with behavior change. I mean, I feel like it's impossible just to try to get all of these messages out, from one, set of staff. It's just not going to happen. So, I mean, as thinking about a communications committee, I think something really valuable might be to create better community partners that can help us get this message out and create behavior change, through peer-to-peer kinds of work. So that was just my feeling about it.
Okay, does anybody else have comment? All right, Shane, you feel like you got enough feedback? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Moving on to the next item, subcommittee reports. Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in and then ask Daniel and Andrea to say what I missed. We did have a quick meeting on the programs subcommittee, and kind of in light of the pandemic and all the things that Shane has been talking about that we're not doing now, these meetings have become a little bit more philosophical, I guess, and less blocking and tackling. But we talked about recruitment and how to reach out to more broadly, and a little bit about the communication subcommittee. And I hopefully people have been able to go to the Google Drive that Daniel set there, the documents that he set up there to sort of add their thinking to what this might become when we get serious about talking about it in January. And then the Move Huge update that Shane just gave us. One of the things that we discussed is that, just as was just talked about, that there's so many items, 63 items. It's very difficult for any staff, I would think, to address that many activities at once. And the way it's structured is a short-term, medium-term, long-term, and then continuing. Maybe another way to look at it is some things are programs and some things are projects. Projects have an end date, whether it's short or medium. Programs are ongoing, and maybe you'd structure it so that you sort of break those things apart and evaluate them a little bit differently. And then there was some sentiment that now that the pandemic is upon us again, it would be wonderful if we could get an increased focus and urgency on the slow streets, and maybe somehow tie it together with the Streeteries program. Although we recognize those are two different sets of staff, it'd be great if those things maybe could get tied together a little bit tighter. And now that, now might be the time to really take advantage of it. Yeah, I guess that's about. Anything to add, guys?
Great. Thank you. Infrastructure?
Infrastructure did not meet.
Well, there you go. And just like that, we're back ahead of schedule.
I'll follow up on an earlier item that I promised to do, and just I'm now sending an email out regarding a bike ride on shared use path lighting. And I don't have the list of the people who I got hands from last time who wanted to go on the ride. So I'm going to send it to everyone on the committee who might want to take part in a bike ride right after dusk to look at prioritizing lighting on shared use paths, primarily in parks. So hopefully we can do that in the next couple of weeks. Get out your rain gear.
All right, Alan, even though I won't be on the committee anymore, maybe you'll let me tag along too.
Well, if we do it before January 1st, maybe you're technically on the committee. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right, I think that is a great segue into our last item, project updates and information share, because I know I have been sharing the West Bank bike path with some very large trucks putting in some lighting. So do we have project updates and information share? I'm staring at Reed's little square.
You feel that, Reed?
Yeah, I'm not sure without putting the bullets in what I'm supposed to talk about during this agenda item. But as you mentioned, Bob, the West Bank path is being done in basically two different parts. What's happening right now is that they're stringing all the conduit and assembling the light poles for the lighting. And then the path construction itself is going to happen when we can do that after the rains next year in 2021. So it's sort of unique too, and I'd like to hear your experience, Bob, about the detours. You should still be able to ride on the path around the construction. And if it occurs to you to take a picture of how they're communicating that to folks, I would appreciate that, because we do have a drawing of what they're supposed to do, and I don't have any record of what they're actually doing. But this is sort of a good way to provide access, is just to tell the contractors that you need to either have a flagger or you need to have a detour on site when you have a truck park somewhere. And that's what we decided to do on this project. So I hope that it's going well. I haven't heard a lot of complaints from the community about it. So I think overall it's working.
You want to hear my experience?
Yes.
there are signs that say work ahead, slow down, which is good. When you do get up to where they are working and the trucks are blocking, I have seen them try to get the trucks off of the bike path as much as possible to keep it open, but there are several places where they're probably covering 75% of the path. And it is completely up to the riders and the walkers to figure out how to safely navigate around the vehicle. There are no flaggers. There are no, none of the construction workers are providing any direction. But, I mean, honestly, it's hard to miss the trucks. And so you're getting very aware when you get close that this is a unique situation. And I think that it's really been good on the part of the users of the path, that they are the ones making the space. They are the ones making sure that if they're coming up to that pinch point, that they're slowing down and making sure that they can see completely across the through path where the truck is before they go forward. I hope that as they complete the work, because there are some areas where they've had to cut out a little bit of the pavement. And I've ridden it day and night, and I know at night it is actually well marked. They've painted white paint around the cutouts, so you can see them with your light. They're illuminated fairly well as having orange posts in there so that you can see that, you know, you don't want to be riding through it. I would be a little worried in the wintertime as things go dormant as far as the work, that some of those areas might get open to less visibility, especially if we have any snowfall. So it might be something that the city would want to just ensure that those cutouts are either very well marked or in some way blocked so that we don't have an incident. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I know it's there, and just because I want to see how it's progressing, I've actually been riding through it. But I mean, when I'm in a hurry, I cross over to the other side so that I could avoid all of the construction. But I mean, overall, I know it's a big project and they need to be there. And I do appreciate that they have signage up that, you know, they're treating it just like they're working on a regular road, other than not really having flaggers and, you know, someone physically moving traffic in an organized way around when the trucks are being blocked. So
I will, I'll just mention, since we haven't had a meeting since this official announcement came out, but you probably saw it in motion and in the other sort of information releases if you're part of Central Eugene in Motion. But we did get final approval from leadership to move forward with design of High Street as the project to connect Amazon to the riverfront. So that project is moving forward in the design phase and will go to bid sometime next year. So that's exciting. Yeah, it was brought up before, but I just wanted to highlight that. And that information is on the Central Eugene in Motion page on that project website. And I do know that just looking at our project page, that there are the Northeast Livable Streets project did go out to bid, but I'm not sure where that project is now. I don't know if the bids have closed on that.
Construction 2021. Yeah, it's been bid and contractor is.
Oh, it was.
Hopefully, they should have started it this fall and didn't. So spring.
Yeah. So that's exciting. That's another one that has been kind of punted down the road, so to speak, a couple times. So that one is going into construction in 2021. And then other projects, Reed, I know Safe Routes to School project finished. Other big ones that are coming up for 2021, because that's sort of where we are now with the winter of getting these projects bid to start construction in 2021.
We had a pretty big meeting today with, I want to respect our time here too, but with the town square folks. So next year we're repaving 8th Avenue downtown from Mill Street, which is also known as Coburg Road or Broadway or Ferry Street, all the way to Lincoln. And we're going to develop one-way protected bike lanes on 8th Avenue and also two-way the street. So 8th Avenue will be two-way. Parking will be removed from the south side. It will only be on the north side, and there will be protected bike lanes. And the town square sits in the middle of this. And if you've been following city council, they said, let's go ahead and sort of build the north part of that. The south part of that won't get built. And while they were going to build the portion of 8th Avenue that goes through the town square, they're not anymore. So that's our project to do. So we're sort of planning on how to put all of that together. But that is well into design. We're probably at 75% of the design process there and still talking through it. And then, you know, it's impacted by the decision on High Street because 8th Avenue intersects with High Street. And so part of what we're trying to decide is how much we need to put back with the 8th Avenue project versus the High Street project, which is chasing it probably 6 months behind. So there are some of those details that we're still trying to figure out in addition to the town square, but all of those conversations are having right now are really good, really positive. We're going to get this done. It's going to happen in 2021, hopefully. And so we'll be right on schedule to follow behind it on High Street in 2022, hopefully. And then downtown will be great.
Excellent. Do any of the ATC members have any information they'd like to share at this point? Josh?
Yeah, I had two things. Number one was I want to thank all of you committee members for participating. This is our last meeting of the year, and it's been a crazy year, but it's been really great to see you guys a Thursday a month. And I also want to thank staff for showing up consistently to these meetings. There are some committees you're involved in that only one staff member whose job it is to work on the committee shows up. But we consistently get more than just one staff member, and that is really nice. The second thing is, as Shane mentioned earlier, I'm on the STIF Advisory Committee. I'm going to put a link to what that is in the chat because it's not really easy to find materials, but there's a lot of great projects that are up to be funded this time around, not just bike share, but mobility on demand projects, transit connections to rural communities and the coast, and really cool technology projects, electric buses. So there's a lot of neat stuff being funded. If anybody has any questions, either in the committee or in the audience, please feel free to reach out to me. Thanks.
Yeah, just a real quick note, Josh. I think that could be an interesting agenda item in itself. I think of like maybe once it's all funded of like a report on what that is, because I agree there's a lot in there, and you know there's some projects that we're working on, you know, cross department and agency wise that we're working on together that are pretty exciting in that too.
Marina, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to say, if is there a way that the city reminds bicyclists about being careful during the rainy season? Because last 2 weeks ago on Tuesday, I was on River Road working, and I was driving away from the place that I was working. As I was getting into River Road, I see two females riding on their bicycles and swearing. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but going like this, swaying, and from on the sidewalk, and they cross the street next to where I was, and the second bicyclist fall down, hit her head on the street. I was I needed to go, but I just waited until the other friend noticed that she had fallen down. And then I saw two gentlemen aiding this girl. They were adults, but I think she slipped with a bicycle. And then as I'm driving south on River Road, getting to Chambers 2nd Avenue, another female bicyclist and two policemen were assisting her. She was still on the ground and her bicycle was also on the ground. I kept going. And last week also on 28 and the street, the intersection 28 and the street after Friendly, going west and Friendly, I noticed the car next to me on my left that was going to do a left turn abruptly stopped in the intersection. And it was because there was a bicyclist in front of him. I also didn't notice the bicyclist because he was wearing a black jersey and a very tiny red light. It was past 5 already. So I was thinking, is that I kind of remember that sometimes you were talking about reminding bicyclists about being safer during the rainy season.
Yeah, we have a Be Safe, Be Seen, some outreach that we've done in the past, and as well as giving away lights. And we did some of that at the beginning of this year. But yeah, we can have a conversation about different other educational outreach things too that we could do.
That reminds me though too, when your batteries, if you're using a rear blinky or even a front, usually notice the front but not the rear because it's behind you. When your battery starts getting low, it gets really dim. And I always alert people that like that's happening, and they usually appreciate it because they just don't know.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else comments? We're right up at time. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate all the work you're going to continue to do. And I guess as my last official act as a member of the ATC for this go around, I will call this meeting adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Hope to see you out and about at some point.
Absolutely.